The night I first noticed her slipping away from me, the sky over Charleston bled tangerine and lavender. We were sitting at a small Italian bistro just off King Street. Her choice, of course. Marisol had always had a taste for romance, for candlelit corners and wine lists that read like poetry. She claimed it reminded her of a semester she spent abroad in Florence, though I'd begun to suspect over the years that Florence was more of a fantasy than a memory. It was our 9th anniversary. She wore a pale cream dress with a neckline that fluttered like a secret whenever she leaned forward. Her dark hair was twisted into a knot at the base of her neck, and from where I sat, I could smell the faint trace of her perfume, rosemary, vanilla, and something unplaceable, like wet earth after rain. Marisol had always been beautiful, but there was something different that night. A spark behind her eyes that didn't belong to me. The restaurant, Osteria del Mare, was new, trendy. The kind of place that didn't take reservations, but always had a full dining room. The kitchen was visible from our table, a glass wall separating us from the heat and the fury of the line. Stainless steel gleamed under soft light, and flames rose like choreographed dances behind the cooks. That's when I saw him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in black chef's whites with sleeves rolled to his elbows. Tattoos climbed up one arm, disappearing beneath the fabric. I watched as he sprinkled fresh herbs onto a dish with slow, deliberate fingers that would come to haunt me. Marisol didn't see me watching him. Or maybe she did and didn't care. She was sipping wine, her lips stained a muted red, and talking about the renovations she wanted to make in the guest room. Her words were airy, meaningless. I nodded, distracted. After dinner, we walked to the car in silence. She linked her arm through mine like always, but her grip was looser, more performative. I noticed the way she glanced behind her once, back toward the restaurant, back toward the kitchen. That was the beginning. Weeks passed, then months, like snow melting underfoot, quiet and unnoticed until the ground is bare. I wish I could say I was blind, but the truth is I was looking the other way. I buried myself in work, convincing myself that late meetings and endless emails were noble, necessary. I was an architect by trade, a planner by obsession. I could organize concrete and steel into permanence, but I couldn't see my own wife unraveling before me. Marisol started cooking more. It wasn't unusual. She'd always loved to cook, but now it was different. She began experimenting with sauces she couldn't pronounce, with ingredients she had delivered from specialty markets. Her knife skills improved. She wore an apron with Osteria embroidered in delicate script across the chest. It was a gift, she said, from a friend. She didn't say which one. And the food, God, the food. It was like a love letter to someone else. Dishes full of passion and intention, flavors that didn't belong to us, that never had. She made things we'd never shared before. Pasta hand-rolled, sauces simmered for hours, seafood so fresh it seemed to tremble on the plate. I asked her one night, "Where did you learn to cook like this?" She gave me a smile so soft it hurt. "I've been watching some tutorials," she said. "YouTube." But her hands told a different story. They were rougher now, calloused in places I didn't remember. Her nails were shorter. Her fingers moved like they had been trained by someone, not by a screen. I found the receipt one Tuesday evening. It was tucked into her coat pocket when I went to hang it in the hallway closet. She rarely left receipts. She hated clutter. But this one stood out. It was from Osteria del Mare, dated for a Thursday 3 weeks prior. A single meal for two, wine included. She had told me she was meeting her sister for dinner that night. I held onto the receipt like a relic, folded it into a drawer in my office, and stared at it for hours. The name of the chef was printed at the bottom, Chef Luca Moretti. I Googled him. The image that appeared on the screen made my stomach lurch. It was him, the same man I had seen through the glass wall on our anniversary. His biography was brief. Born in Milan, trained in Florence, worked in Michelin-starred kitchens across Europe before settling in Charleston for love, the article said, though it didn't say whose. The affair didn't reveal itself with screaming matches or lipstick-stained collars. It whispered through our home like a draft under the door. Marisol grew softer, more elusive. She began to wear perfume again, heavier now, muskier. Her laughter, when it came, sounded like it belonged in someone else's house. And then there were the calls. Late at night, when she thought I was asleep, I'd hear her on the balcony, whispering, her voice low, intimate. I never caught the words, only the cadence, gentle, breathy, reverent. The way one speaks to a lover, not a friend. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more. My heart was broken, yes, but my pride was intact. And pride demands evidence. It was a Saturday morning when I followed her. She said she was going to the farmer's market downtown. I waited 5 minutes, then grabbed my keys and followed at a distance. I'd never done something like that before. My hands shook on the steering wheel, a mixture of shame and something sharper. Curiosity, maybe, or fear. She didn't go to the market. She drove past it, made a right onto Calhoun, and pulled into the alley behind Osteria del Mare. I parked down the block and walked. From the edge of the alley, hidden behind a trash bin that reeked of fish and old garlic, I saw her. Chef Luca was waiting by the back door. He wasn't in uniform, just jeans and a tight black t-shirt. His tattoos were even more vivid in the daylight. Marisol approached him with a familiarity that made my stomach knot. She reached for him. He kissed her, slow, deliberate, the kind of kiss that held history. She ran her fingers through his hair, laughed against his mouth. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My legs felt like they had dissolved beneath me. She kissed him again, then took his hand and disappeared through the back door. I sat in my car for what felt like an hour, watching the world continue around me like none of it mattered. People laughed, strolled with coffees, checked their phones. I wanted to scream, to burst through the kitchen doors and drag her out by the wrist. But I didn't. Instead, I went home. The house was too quiet. Her perfume lingered in the air, haunting. I sat on the couch and stared at the blank television, her betrayal playing on loop in my mind. When she came home hours later, carrying a small bag of cherry tomatoes and fresh bread, I pretended not to notice the lipstick smudge on her collar. "Did you find everything you needed?" I asked. She smiled. "Yes. The heirlooms were gorgeous today." I nodded. But I already knew. Marisol's lie simmered in the room long after she vanished into the bathroom. I sat at the dining table, staring at the bag of tomatoes she'd brought back from the market. They were too perfect. Bright red, still dewy, their stems crisp and green. Not a single blemish. I knew the produce stands downtown. They didn't carry tomatoes like this. I stood slowly and opened the paper bag. Underneath the tomatoes was a thick slice of focaccia wrapped in butcher paper. I tore it open. The aroma hit me immediately. Olive oil, rosemary, sea salt. It was unmistakable. I had tasted it once before, months ago, when Marisol brought home leftovers from a girls' night at the restaurant. I remembered how she stood behind me in the kitchen, watching as I chewed. "It's from Osteria," she had said, too casually. Chef's new specialty. Back then, I didn't think much of it. But now, holding it in my hands, the scent clinging to my fingertips, I felt the heat rising up my spine. She was bringing pieces of him into my home. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay beside her, the sheets between us like a curtain, her breathing soft and untroubled. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the scene in the alley. The way he'd looked at her. The way she leaned into him like they shared something sacred. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a fling. She loved him. 2 weeks passed. I said nothing. I watched everything. Her habits became clockwork. Tuesdays and Saturdays, she went to the market. Wednesdays, she took yoga. On Thursdays, she went shopping with Elena. Always in the late morning. Always returning mid-afternoon, flushed and smiling. The lies came so smoothly now, polished from use. I tracked her once more. Only once. It felt like enough. She was back in that alley, in his arms. No more hesitation. They kissed like it was normal, routine, the way I used to kiss her when we were new and everything felt urgent. I wanted to confront her, but I didn't know how. My rage was no longer sharp. It was heavy, like wet sand. I wasn't just angry. I was tired. So I planned. The idea came to me during a client walkthrough at a commercial build downtown. The contractor was explaining the layout of a future kitchen, a sleek, open design with exposed brick and an imported Italian pizza oven. As he spoke, I found myself staring at the blueprints, the way the service entrance connected to the alley behind the building. Osteria del Mare had a similar setup. I went home and began sketching from memory. The restaurant's layout, as best I could recall. Entry points, exits, kitchen line. I even marked where Luca had stood that night. I was an architect. Details were my weapon. Later, I researched security systems. Cameras. I found a model small enough to fit in a jacket button linked to my phone. I bought 2. One for recon. One for proof. Because soon, I wasn't going to just follow her. I was going to enter her world. The plan hinged on a catering event Marisol mentioned one night over dinner. Osteria was closing for a private booking the following Saturday, some kind of intimate chef's table experience. She dropped it into the conversation like an afterthought, but her eyes gleamed. "I might help out," she said, poking at her risotto. "Luke is short on staff." I didn't blink. "That's thoughtful of you." She smiled, relieved I hadn't pried. "He says I'm a natural in the kitchen, like I've done this all my life." I smiled back, my fork pausing midair. "He sounds like a good teacher." That Saturday, I parked 2 blocks away and walked. I wore black jeans, a gray button-up, and a wool cap low over my brow. My camera was pinned at chest level. I carried a clipboard and a black satchel, just enough to look like I belonged. I entered through the alley. The back door was ajar, propped open with a crate of lemons. Inside, the kitchen buzzed with quiet purpose. Pans clanged. Someone cursed in Italian. Music drifted from a Bluetooth speaker, slow jazz with a Mediterranean twist. I slipped in unnoticed. Just another delivery guy, perhaps a tech consultant. I walked the perimeter, pretending to inspect the gas lines. And then, through the half-open pantry door, I saw her. Marisol. She was laughing, head thrown back, her hand on Luca's chest. He was whispering something in her ear. His hand found her waist. They stood like they had nowhere else to be. It wasn't lust. It was intimacy, the kind that grows in shadow. She kissed him. I turned and left before I could see more. That night, I downloaded the footage. I watched it in silence. Not just the kiss. Everything. The way she touched him. The way she looked at him. As if he were the sun and she was finally allowed to feel its warmth. I stayed up until dawn. The next morning, I laid the footage on a thumb drive and placed it in a small wooden box. I wrote a single note. Proof enough. Then I left it in her jewelry drawer. I went about my day as usual, cleaned the gutters, took a long walk, made lunch. I didn't wait for her to find it. I didn't even watch her face. It was late afternoon when she came to me. Her expression was unreadable, pale and tight at the edges. "I saw what you left," she said. I nodded. She didn't sit. She hovered by the window like a trapped bird. I never meant for it to get that far. I said nothing. I didn't feel like me anymore. "You were always so busy. You stopped seeing me." I turned to her slowly. "You think I stopped seeing you?" She faltered. "You were always working. The house, your projects." I felt invisible. "You weren't invisible," I said quietly. "You were sacred." Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't move to comfort her. "I know," she whispered. "I know I ruined everything." The silence stretched between us like a chasm. "I don't know what to do," she finally said. And I told her the truth. "Neither do I." She left the room, and for a long while, I just stood there. The sun was setting again, painting the sky with lavender and tangerine. Same as that first night. Only now, the restaurant, the chef, the warmth, all of it felt miles away. Or maybe I was the one who had left. The days after our confrontation moved like fog, dense and directionless. Marisol avoided me, not out of fear, I don't think, but confusion. She lingered in the bedroom longer in the mornings. She took her meals at odd times. When I came home from work, she was always in a different room, half inventing tasks that didn't need doing. It wasn't silence. It was restraint. Like we were both standing on the edge of something jagged and wide, afraid to speak because the wrong word might send us tumbling into it. The wooden box with the thumb drive had been returned to my desk drawer. She never asked me to delete it. She didn't plead or promise. I noticed that. She never apologized, either. I found myself spending more time in the garage. It was where I worked on models, scaled-down mock-ups of the buildings I designed. I used to love it. Now it felt more like a bunker. I'd run my fingers over balsa wood, thinking about her hands on Luca's skin, about how she stood in his kitchen, not ours, how she kissed him with her eyes still open. In the evenings, I'd hear her upstairs, sometimes humming softly. Sometimes the music was playing from the kitchen, and for a moment, I'd believe things were normal, until the scent of rosemary would reach me, and the illusion would snap like a dry twig. She was still cooking, still bringing those same flavors into our house, as if nothing had changed. It was a Thursday when she knocked on the garage door. I turned down the music and opened it. She stood in her wool coat, hair damp from the light drizzle outside. Her makeup was minimal, just enough to show effort. Her hands were in her pockets. "I need to talk," she said. Can I come in? I stepped aside and watched her enter. She walked slowly, looking around like she hadn't seen the place in years. She stopped at my drafting table, fingers trailing along the edges. Your models are beautiful, she said. They're just plans, I replied. They're not real. She flinched at that, and I hated how part of me enjoyed it. I hated that I could be cruel. I haven't seen Lucas since that night, she said softly. I ended it. I said nothing. I thought it would be harder, she continued. But it wasn't. It felt like closing a door I never should have walked through. Why? I asked. It came out harsher than I meant. Why did you walk through it at all? She turned to face me fully. Because I felt unseen. I waited. You've always been strong. Steady. But somewhere along the way, we stopped talking. You were always working, always solving things. And I was just there, filling the fridge, making dinner. I wanted to feel needed, desired. And he gave you that. She hesitated. He gave me attention. He made me feel alive. But it wasn't real. It was the idea of being wanted that pulled me in. I stepped closer. And me? I gave you a life. A home. 9 years of loyalty. Is that not real? It is, she said. It's the realest thing I've ever had. I didn't know what to say. I want to fix this, she whispered. But I don't know how. The silence returned, heavier now. I looked down at my hands, calloused from work, stained with graphite. This isn't something we patch with apologies, Marisol. This isn't a hole in the drywall. I know, she said. But maybe it's a crack in the foundation. And cracks can be reinforced. We tried. God help me, we tried. We started having coffee together again in the mornings. Simple, quiet rituals. I'd pour hers first, hand it to her without looking. She'd thank me, always with a careful tone, like she didn't want to startle the moment. We took walks after dinner. Not far, just around the block, but they were steps nonetheless. She'd loop her arm through mine, and sometimes it felt like the past, and other times it felt like two strangers pretending to be familiar. The sex didn't return. We didn't speak of it. It hovered between us like a question we were afraid to answer. Instead, we focused on logistics. Errands, taxes, grocery runs, neutral things, safe things. But there were moments, small flashes where something real flickered through. Like the time we bumped into an old couple at the park, and the man said, 42 years married, and she still corrects my grammar. We both laughed, genuine, breathless laughter. And for a second, I saw the girl I married. Or the night we sat on the porch during a thunderstorm, our knees brushing, saying nothing, just listening to the rain. It was these moments that gave me hope. Not for a return to what we were, but the chance to build something new on top of the rubble. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Monday, tucked between credit card offers and the water bill. Handwritten, no return address. Just my name, in unfamiliar script. I opened it in the kitchen while Marisol was upstairs. It read, "You don't know the whole story. If you did, you'd never take her back. Come by the restaurant tomorrow night. After hours. Back entrance. I'll tell you everything." There was no signature. I stared at the letter for a long time. My hands trembled, not from fear, but fury. And something else. Something colder. Curiosity. That night, I barely slept. I listened to Marisol's breathing, her hand resting loosely on my arm. Like a peace offering she didn't know she was giving. Her warmth should have comforted me. Instead, it felt foreign. I kept the letter in my drawer. And I told myself I wouldn't go. I told myself again in the shower, and once more while tying my shoes. I told myself when I passed the turnoff on my way home from work. But by 8:45 p.m., I was parked in the alley behind Osteria del Mare. The back door was propped open, again with a crate, this time of oranges. I stepped inside. The kitchen was dim, lit only by a few overhead bulbs. Pans were stacked neatly, counters wiped clean. The scent of citrus and garlic still clung to the air. Then I saw him. Luca. He was leaning against the prep table, arms crossed, still in his black shirt, sleeves rolled. His face was unreadable. "You came," he said. I didn't speak. He gestured to a stool. "Sit. Please." I stayed standing. Luca exhaled, then looked me dead in the eyes. "She told you it ended." But it didn't. A pulse thundered in my ears. She came back the next week. Said she needed closure. Said she missed how I made her feel. My jaw clenched. She said she was trying to fix things with you. But she didn't seem convinced. I took a slow step forward. Luca shrugged. "I thought you deserved to know. Maybe it means nothing. Maybe it changes everything. It did. I didn't remember walking out of that restaurant. One moment I was staring at Luca's face, memorizing the curve of his smug expression, the way his voice didn't tremble, not even a little. The next, I was back in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles had gone white. The alley behind Osteria del Mare vanished in the rearview mirror like smoke in the night. The streets of Charleston were hushed, warm air rising off the asphalt in faint, wavering lines. My mind spun in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just drove in circles, as if trying to find a version of my life that hadn't just been incinerated. So it hadn't ended. She lied. Again. I got home close to midnight. The house was dark. I didn't turn on the lights. I moved through the rooms in silence, my footsteps careful. Our bedroom door was slightly ajar. I pushed it open gently. Marisol was asleep. The moonlight slanted across her face. Peaceful, unaware. A small crease in her brow twitched as she shifted slightly, pulling the covers tighter. She looked like the woman I had married, whole, unspoiled by betrayal. But that was a lie too. I watched her for a long time. Then I turned and walked into the guest room. I slept alone. The next morning, she knew. She didn't say anything when she found the note on the dining table. We're done. I know the truth. Don't speak. Just leave. She stood frozen for a long time, staring at the paper. I watched from the hallway, hidden in shadow. She didn't cry. Her hands trembled slightly, and I thought for a moment she might say something. But instead, she folded the note in half, placed it in her coat pocket, and walked upstairs. When she came down 20 minutes later, her suitcase was in hand. She paused at the threshold, looking around as if memorizing the walls. She didn't look for me. I waited until the front door clicked shut, and then I collapsed. I didn't tell anyone for a while. My friends noticed the change in routine. My mother asked if we were taking space. I didn't answer. I was building silence like a wall. I spent most of my days working, throwing myself into drafts and renderings with a desperation that bordered on obsession. Nights were worse. The house echoed in strange ways. Too many empty chairs. Too many scents that lingered. Her lotion in the bathroom, the rosemary from the pantry. Every room felt like a ghost of her. I tried cooking once, just to reclaim something. I made risotto. It tasted like regret. Weeks passed. Then a month. I found her scarf one morning while cleaning out the hall closet. It was tucked between winter coats, forgotten, still holding her perfume. I held it to my face without thinking, and was flooded with memories. Her laugh in Florence. Her breath on my shoulder. The way she used to curl her legs beneath her on the couch while reading. I dropped the scarf like it had burned me. That day, I deleted her contact from my phone. That night, I slept without dreaming. It was 3 months later when the letter arrived. This one was addressed properly, in her handwriting. No mystery. No games. Just a clean white envelope left in my mailbox, like a quiet apology. I opened it slowly. Daniel, it began. I've signed the papers. I'll spare you the details. You don't need more of my words. I lied. I betrayed. I tried to fix something I had already broken. And then I broke it again. You were right to let me go. I've moved out of Charleston. I'm working at a cooking school now, just a few nights a week. Nothing dramatic. No audience. Just flour, eggs, hands. I haven't seen him. I won't. That chapter is closed. Sometimes I make risotto, and I think about that night on our anniversary. You didn't know then, but I saw it in your eyes. I think part of you already knew. And still, you danced with me. Still, you tried. I'll never forget that. I hope, in time, you forget me. I read it once. Then again. Then I set it on fire over the kitchen sink. Time is strange. It doesn't heal, not really, but it dulls the edges. The sharp, raw ache became a background hum, then a whisper, then something even quieter. I stopped waking up expecting her body beside mine. I started cooking again. I even repainted the dining room. Something she'd always wanted, but I'd put off. Soft gray, clean lines. Sometimes I caught myself looking toward the alley behind Osteria del Mare when I passed it. But it no longer twisted in my gut. It just was. I went on a few dates. Polite dinners, safe conversations. I wasn't ready for anything serious, but I learned how to laugh again. It felt strange at first, like stepping into someone else's skin, but eventually it began to fit. I was learning how to live without ghosts. 6 months after she left, I returned to the restaurant. Not for closure. Not for nostalgia. Just hunger. I had been walking alone through downtown after a client meeting. The wind had picked up, and I ducked into the first place I saw with lights still on. Only after I sat down did I realize where I was. The dining room had changed. New decor, new tables, new faces. The energy felt different, lighter. I looked toward the kitchen, and there he was, Luca. He didn't see me. Or if he did, he didn't show it. I ordered the house risotto. When it arrived, I picked up the spoon slowly. It was good. Of course it was. But it didn't taste like betrayal anymore. It just tasted like risotto. I left a generous tip and walked into the night, the cold air biting at my collar. Later, when I got home, I stood in the kitchen for a long time. I pulled out the rice, the broth, Parmesan. I cooked slowly, deliberately, letting the smells fill the house. It was different now, less memory, more intention. When it was done, I poured a glass of wine and sat at the table. Alone, but not lonely. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in months. No dreams. Just quiet. Just peace.